Liza, there is a lot to digest last night, but I want to start with the potential repeal of the CHIPS Act. This was really supposed to cement our position in the AI competitive landscape. Does this put us at risk of falling behind?
Yes, the comments that Trump made in his speech last night were not new. He's on the record of complaining about subsidies. And what's really at the heart of his concerns is not wanting to be subsidizing other countries. And so he, in his first term and now he's putting pressure to get our allies to reimburse us. He really feels like it's unfair that TSMC, a Taiwanese company, has gotten subsidies. And so you've seen this ratcheting up of pressure on TSMC that resulted in the $100 billion announcement that TSMC will put even more investment into the United States. The $65 billion already announced before in the Biden administration was already the largest foreign direct investment in U.S. history. And so by adding another $100 billion to that, it really tops the chart. So it kind of remains to be seen if that will be enough to kind of satisfy him that he's been reimbursed by Taiwan and TSMC for these subsidies. But that's really at the heart of his concerns.
How then can a local player like an Intel be reimbursed? Liza, talk us through what you think the carrot and the stick situation is for local players who have been promised local U.S. money.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it, Caroline. I mean, the stick, of course, is tariffs. And I agree with your previous commentator that his favorite tool, his kind of Swiss Army knife policy tool, is the tariff. And so that was the stick that we heard about. But there were also some kind of promising carrots sprinkled through his speech. He talked about tax cuts for manufacturers to buy more equipment. That would be a positive thing. He also talked about high-skilled talent. So the attention has gone to his proposed gold card idea, where high net worth individuals could pay $5 million to get a green card. But also buried in the speech was an allusion to the issue of high-skilled graduates from U.S. universities having to leave the United States and not being able to stay and get a green card. And so it sounds like President Trump wants to change that. And that's something that many companies complain about as being the #1 constraint to setting up companies and manufacturing plants in the United States is a lack of skilled workforce.
Let's talk more about that talent pipeline, because the CHIPS Act was not only providing money for the manufacturing of plants, but also to agencies like the National Science Foundation, which really develops a lot of these master's degree, doctorate level students that eventually end up in the private sector. By yanking that funding away, what does that do to that pipeline of talent longer term?
Yeah, I think here there are a couple parts of President Trump's agenda that are working cross purposes. On the one hand, his instincts are that we need to attract the best and the brightest to the United States. But on the other hand, you have DOGE kind of firing workers across the federal workforce and trying to cut funding. So if that starts cutting things like federally funded R&D and other support for science, there's a very strong track record of that kind of federal investment in R&D paying off over the long term economically and in terms of moonshot programs. And so here I think Trump's agenda is kind of fighting within itself, and it remains to be seen how that fight will be resolved.
Liza, we bring you on time and time again to the show because of your Chinese expertise here, whether it was previously at the Special Competitive Studies Project, you're now, of course, with Garnaut Global, thinking about geopolitical risk. In 30 seconds, is the new policy, the new administration, setting the U.S. up better or worse versus China?
So what's interesting is China has been a bit on the back burner in President Trump's first 6 weeks. He's not talking about China as much. It only came up very briefly a couple of times in his speech last night, kind of in passing. But we know that over on the other side of the Pacific, Beijing is opening up its National People's Congress today. Their premier made comments kind of reinforcing their desire to annex Taiwan. And, they're ratcheting up the pressure in the Taiwan Strait. So it's only a matter of time before China kind of forces itself back onto the front burner of Trump's agenda.